Hi, APUSH students. I made a video here to help you review the periods of AP US history. We covered periods 1 through 5 in the first semester. Hopefully you can find these helpful as you prepare for the exam and as you continue to keep up with your studies during our break between quarters and semesters. Let me give you a quick overview of where we're headed. With these period reviews, I'm going to use the APUSH theme chart. You guys were given this in class. We filled out some of this on our own. This comes from the Khan Academy page. You can find it, I believe it's on one of their last pages. I think it's on their test prep page. But I'm going to use that as a guide to help kind of dictate where we're going in terms of the content that we're reviewing. And I'm also going to present a slide on primary source documents that would be helpful to go back and look at and understand for this particular period. And I'm also going to take a look at the historical thinking skills and how they might be applied on test questions from this period. Remember, period 1 is a pretty short one. The essays on the exam do not usually, or they specifically don't come from this period. However, you could use context from period 1, and you could also cite period 1 events if you're trying to describe things that have changed or things that have remained the same in a continuity and change essay. You could also compare things to it. So it's not completely out of sight, out of mind. It is a period we have to know. And so I'll review some of those topics with you here as we go along. So real quick, let's look back at the years. We've got 1491 to 1607. Those are the years of period 1. Remember 1491, that's right before Christopher Columbus shows up in 1492. And then 1607, that is the settlement at Jamestown, the first English settlement in the American colonies. And so that's why we have those years. Remember, those years are always important. We always need to know what those years mean. Okay, let's jump into these themes. The first theme is American and national identity. Now, understand that as we go through these, in each period, we might emphasize one more than some of the others. Period 1 and period 5 are very different in terms of the United States history. And so some of these themes will have a lot of content for certain periods and some may not. In this case, we don't have a whole lot here. There's a couple of key terms I want to add in as we look at American and national identity. Understand that we're looking at Native American groups in both South, Central, and North America that are present when Europeans first arrive. Groups like the Aztecs. Let me go back here, get my pen going. Groups like the Aztecs, the Mayans, or the Mayas, the Incas in South America. So these are the major groups that are present in Central and South America. And then we have a large number of Native American tribes and North American tribes. And we'll talk about some of those specific tribes later on. But there are many and they are scattered. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult for Native groups to resist the European colonizers, is that they're not very united across. They become united as they face resistance from Europeans, but that's one thing that we could look at as historians and say might have hurt them when it comes to the exploitation and conquest of them. The other thing to note is that when Europeans first arrived, they did not intend to stay and make North America a permanent settlement. They intended to find resources. We'll talk about this more later, but they looked for gold and other resources. They were going to take it and leave and take, if they needed to, they were going to take labor or native labor with them. But their main focus was gold. Let's jump over here to politics and power during this time period. Again, not a super critical theme with this one. One thing that we want to highlight is it's the Spanish that are the first to arrive and have a big influence in North America. It's obviously not the United States yet, but the Spanish are first. They land in modern-day Mexico and Central America. One word that we'll want to be able to recognize is conquistadors. The conquistadors, that was the name given to the Spanish conquerors. You had people like Hernán Cortez, who famously overcame and conquered and exploited the Aztec Empire He had the help of disease, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we also have the French and Dutch who show up during this time, and we'll talk more about them later when we get into comparison. But those are a couple things with those two themes, some key terms to be aware of. Let's jump on over to the next set. Work, technology, and exchange. This is a really big one with this particular period. We've got the Columbian Exchange being probably our most important term or idea to be able to recall from this time. The Columbian Exchange. Remember, that's the exchange of goods from the Old World, Europe, to the New World, North America, and vice versa. Okay, so that's a critical thing that we see occur during this time. We get all sorts of new crops and goods to Europe, all sorts of new technologies arriving in North America. Corn is a big one that impacts North America, and this is really before any sort of exchange occurs, but corn is a crop that really helps Native Americans settle down into one area. They really settle down into one area. We also have the exchange of disease that significantly impacts the population, specifically smallpox. That's one that you could cite if you're trying to use this as for an essay. So we've got those new products, new technologies. You need to go back to your notes or to your textbook to see a long laundry list of all the things that went from Old World to New World. Those are just a couple there. Disease probably being the most significant. We also get new forms of labor, not necessarily new forms. Slavery's been going on for a long time, but we get the institution of slavery in the Spanish colonies during this time, specifically the encomienda system. The encomienda system. That'd be a term you'd want to hold on to. That's the Spanish system of slavery, organized system of slavery to extract resources out of the Spanish colonies, resources and taxes. Let's jump on over to culture and society. One thing that we see and is worth noting is the blending of European, specifically Spanish culture, and indigenous or native culture. We see an example of that or evidence for that in the Spanish caste system that we see show up in this time period, caste system. We see that the Spanish rank people based on whether or not they're a combination of Spanish and indigenous, or two indigenous people, or Spanish and African, or we get this whole combination of different groups of people and their rank in society. There's a primary source document that we have on the last page that we'll talk about with that. So we've got the Spanish caste system. With that, we get terms like mestizo. Sorry, that's kind of ugly there. That's an E, mestizo. Mestizo, describing somebody who is native and Spanish mix, ethnically mixed. We also get the first debates about the ethics of man, my E's are looking really bad. The ethics of colonization. Bartolome, and I'm sorry, I don't know why that's looking so bad over there. Bartolome de las Casas is one who brings to mind this issue of exploitation of native groups. He is a priest, and he says that he's been to Spanish North America several times. He's lived there. He's spent time there. He's seen the atrocities there, and he has several speeches and publications and debates where he talks about the ugliness of colonization in North America and the subjugation of the Native American people. So we'll look at that later on as well. 3 categories here. We'll try to get through these quickly. So when we look at migration and settlement here, obviously we've got the Europeans arriving from across the ocean. New technology helps them do that. We've got native groups who arrived from the land bridge a long, long time ago, the Bering Strait up in Alaska. That's what most anthropologists and historians believe people came to North America from. I'm not going to add a whole lot here. We don't have any super key terms here to support this theme, as long as you understand these things that we've already talked about, Europeans coming to extract resources. So I'm going to jump over to geography and environment. When we look at geography and environment, that's going to be one of the things that we find ourselves comparing later on. So gold and other resources. Oh, got to go back here. Gold and other resources are the big reasons why the Spanish come and continue to arrive. That's what drives exploration, their search for gold. Another thing that we need to mention is sugar becomes a big cash crop. And then down the road, we're going to see tobacco. And that's not yet. In fact, I should probably leave this off of here, but I just want to get other cash crops in mind. We see rice as well. Cash crops are a big deal when we talk about why people are arriving and how they use that environment to make money. We already talked about disease. We mentioned smallpox. That's one of the big ones. Influenza is also a major killer. So influenza is another one. So we see those diseases come and wreak havoc on the native population. Let's jump over to America in the world. This one, we're really looking at, since we don't have American colonies yet, we're really looking at European powers and their conflict with each other and their conflicts with Native Americans. So because we've seen the Protestant Reformation occur in Europe, we've got this big rivalry between Protestants and Catholics, and it's driving exploration as both groups seek to evangelize or spread their religion throughout the world. So that's going to drive, I'm going to put the word competition here, competition. That's going to drive competition to get to other places and spread their religion. So that's something to think about there. We also get the slave trade that begins. We're going to develop that more later. We get obviously the Columbian Exchange we've already talked about. We get the Treaty of Tordesillas, which is not overly critical for U.S. history, but we get several things kind of putting North America specifically into the world stage and into the competitive world stage. Again, not a huge one there. That's one that we're going to focus on as America grows and becomes involved in international disputes more. Okay, let's talk about primary sources real quick. So I've got 5 things listed here. I've got let's go back again. I always forget to do that. Okay, I've got the document number listed for your textbook, and that's if you're not in my class, the textbook is America's History. That's Henrietta is the main, is the first author on there, America's History. So that's document 1-3, Columbus's Journal. De las Casas, a brief account of the destruction of the Indies. We talked about him before. That is, I forgot to write it on there, but that is document 1-4. Document 1-4. So take a look at that as well. That's his account of the bad things that are occurring in the Spanish colonies. The Valladolid debate, that's a mouthful. Valladolid debate is another one. This isn't in your textbook, but it's one that we mentioned in class. And it is De las Casas debating Sepulveda on the ethics of colonization. And they both discuss the De las Casas is discussing how bad colonization is and how it's not right. Sepulveda is saying otherwise. He discusses that it's just the kind of European powers have been ordained to go conquer. And so they debate that. De las Casas actually wins the debate, but it doesn't stop colonization. So remember, we talked about that in class. Take a look at that. Quick Google search, and you can find that. I'm sure there's videos on it too. Maps of the New World. Those are sometimes used in multiple choice questions on the exam. And then the Spanish caste system, which is right there. That is the primary source document that shows the different ethnic groups. This is Las Casas over here. Las Casas, Bartolomé de las Casas. That's him, probably writing something about how bad the Spanish were to the natives. Really quick, let's talk about some things that might be discussed on the exam, some skills that might be measured, or things you might use from this period in an essay about really any time period, but you might find yourself referencing something from period 1. So when we compare the economic goals of Europe, that's a big thing that can be compared in these early periods, say 1, 2, and 3. So what the Spanish goal is, what the Dutch goal is, what the French goal. Those are things that I've seen on the test before. Another thing that's worth comparing is the treatment of Native Americans by the Spanish and the French and the English, the others that show up. So I've seen those things compared. The other thing, the geography of North America and how that impacted settlement, how that impacted the economies. Those are things that you might find you need to be able to compare, use that comparison skill for on the exam. Continuity and change over time. Again, treatment of Native Americans is something that you would want to be able to discuss in an essay. Again, you won't get an essay specifically about period 1, but you might get an essay about treatment of natives in another time period or something with conflict with natives or something like that. And to demonstrate continuity and or change, you could go back to period 1 and discuss those things that we talked about. Slavery is another topic that is going to show up throughout history. You may be asked to look at continuity and change on that topic. So you want to look at that as well. Lastly, causation. Have seen some essays that ask about the Columbian Exchange, effects of the Columbian Exchange. I'm not sure why my pen's looking so ugly, but you'll want to be able to discuss effects of the Columbian Exchange, the exchange of goods, the trouble that it causes the Native Americans, the start of the massive movements that it starts across the ocean, the slave trade, the dependence of the different continents on one another. Huge effect when it comes to the Columbian Exchange. So you'd want to be able to discuss that as well. But that's period 1. Hopefully you found that